Hi, what's up, everybody? This is Maggie Reichard, and welcome back to another episode of Nursing Uncharted. Thank you guys so much for listening. I just want to say it has been an honor to host this podcast so far. I've loved learning about all the different types of nursing and all the ways that we can use this license while talking to some great people. So I hope that you've been enjoying it too. And if you have been enjoying it, please leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts. We would love to hear what you think. And the more reviews we get on that platform, the more nurses we can kind of reach in the podcast world. So if it has been enjoyable to you, help us get to more nurses out there. So today we are getting into flight nursing, and I'm super pumped about this episode. You could probably hear it in my voice because I know nothing about this realm of nursing, and I have an old nursing school buddy here with me to answer all of my questions today. So here to give us the inside scoop on flight nursing is Hannah MacIsaac. Hannah has been a nurse since 2014, working in adult and pediatric intensive care before becoming a flight nurse in 2020. After growing up moving around the world with a father in the Navy, she now calls the Pacific Northwest home. So Hannah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for having me. This is my first time ever doing something like this, so thank you.
Yeah, most people it is.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, I've loved listening to I've always thought of flight nursing. Like I remember going to a conference and there was like a flight nurse there, like talking about all the cool things about it. I can't wait to hear all about it.
Hopefully I can provide some good stories.
Yeah. I was thinking of thinking back of nursing school. And do you remember when we were paired together? We had it was like a pediatric respite care.
Oh my gosh. And we completely missed the fact that the kids' lips were blue. Like the lights weren't working. And our instructor was like, did you guys not see that like the kid was blue the whole time? And we were like, no.
About that. I forgot about the skills. No, I was talking about, we were paired. We did I think it was peds. It was like respite care. And we went to that boy's house. He was like in middle school or something. He was so sweet. He had like a developmental delay or something. Yeah,
I still have pictures of the three of us. I scrapbooked every year of college.
Stop!
And I'll send it to you when I get home.
Oh my God, send it to me.
But I'm pretty sure I still have pictures, if not of the three of us, at least of our friend. And and it's funny because now do you remember those chips he always ate, the really hot, spicy Takis
yes. Oh my God, I forgot all about that.
I love them.
I just remember them making, it was like Central Virginia, like farm country, and they made us deer jerky. There was like one time they made us as a thank you. Like, this is just so sweet.
Yeah. Oh my God, do you remember that?
I know, that's sparked. Oh my gosh, if you find that picture, you got to send it to me.
Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about flight nursing. You've been a flight nurse for about a year now? Is that right?
Literally now like a year and 9 days. I was sitting at work the other day, and when you begin each 12-hour segment of your 48-hour shift, you fill out a fatigue risk assessment. And so one of the boxes that you check that kind of counts against you as being fatigued and stressed is being a new employee. And I finally do not check that box. And I was like, you guys, I'm not new anymore.
Not fatigued. Not at all. Not one bit.
Not stressed out whatsoever.
Glad that's over.
Yeah.
So it's a 48. So you have we'll get into logistics too, but how did you get started doing flight nursing?
It's funny you mentioned nursing school. Actually, I think it was in our ClinApps 3 class, our critical care part of clinical applications. And we had that super intense and super intimidating professor who I just idolized. She was so cool. And she was a former Air Force nurse. And I remember at one point was talking about flight nursing. And I had tried to join, I think we had one or two nurses doing the Army ROTC, and I had tried to do Air Force ROTC so I could go be a flight nurse for the Air Force. And then sadly, logistically traveling over to UVA and doing nursing school at JMU just was not going to work out. So it ultimately didn't work out. But it kind of stayed in the back of my head, like this flight nursing role.
Yeah.
And then when I was working in my cardiac ICU, I had a coworker who did ground transportation, like ground critical care transportation.
Okay.
And he, like, as a part-time, and then CVI was his full-time job. And he was like, dude, you seem like you kind of go with the flow and you're decently calm when stuff gets stressed out. Have you ever thought about transport? And I was like, oh no. And so he took me on a ride along on the critical care truck.
So cool.
And then another former...
Would you be considered an EMT then at that point? Or are you like a nursing role for ground?
You're still in a nursing role. On different critical care ground companies kind of format it in different ways. In some areas, it's a nurse and an EMT. In other locations, it's a nurse and a medic or two nurses. I believe it varies by state and what your state kind of classifies as like an ALS, BLS, or critical care team.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. But then, I had a former coworker as well. He was a nurse practitioner in Richmond, and he ended up going on to being a flight nurse in Richmond, and called him up one day and was like, hey, I'm super interested in this. What do I need to do to prepare? And he gave me a great rundown of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Did you have to seek out flight nursing jobs? Like, you're in Washington. Did you have to like look, or did you wait until the hospital you were at, like, open a position?
So the way that I found myself in a flight job was, last summer I had been, travel nursing for about a year and a half, a year within the pediatric ICU realm. And then COVID hit, and pediatric ICU censuses dropped, and they needed adult help. So I went back into an adult ICU and was reminded of why I prefer pediatrics. And it was one night in the summer of 2020 when I just had a very adult ICU interaction with a patient that was less than happy with me. And I walked out of the room and was just like, I'm done. And in that moment, I didn't know if I was done with nursing. I didn't know if I was done with just being in the ICU. I didn't know. And I kind of like looked back on my career and I was like, I finally fit like the very basic qualifications to begin applying to flight jobs, to heck with it. Let's Google it. And I literally in the middle of the night at 1 a.m. at this job, Googled fixed wing flight nurse job, saw an ad on Indeed.com for my current position, sent off my resume, got an email back within 2 days. And 2 weeks later, I was being flown out to interview.
Oh my God. That's great. And you're like, bye. Goodbye. This was my dream.
And it worked out that the end of that contract was like the end of September, and they needed me to start kind of around the end of September. So at that time I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, packed up all of my belongings into my car and drove to Washington State.
Oh my gosh. That's so cool. And how have you liked it so far?
I love it. This state is, I grew up moving all around the world with my dad in the Navy, but I never thought that like one state could have so much incredible stuff to do outside. And the only thing it's missing is a warm beach, but my parents live in Florida, so I can go down there anytime I want.
Right. There you go. I know. We just went up there back in April. Yeah. It was, oh my God, so beautiful. The whole coast is like ridiculous. You look like you're in, it looks like Ireland up there, like Oregon coast and then like Washington coast. It's just insane. And just like the nature and the outside qualities. And I mean, it rains, but you just kind of get used to it. And where I live, we're kind of in what's called a rain shadow. So we actually get, I think, like twice the sun Seattle does. Which is great. Gotcha. Yeah. How does that play into like transporting? Like when you're probably in bad weather a lot.
Yeah. Wintertime becomes a very interesting time for us. We definitely are constantly looking at the weather. We're looking at temperatures, the way that weather patterns are moving, the wind, where the wind is coming from. I learned, you never want to land in a crosswind. And if you've got crosswinds gusting at greater than 20, it proves for a very bumpy ride, just kind of stuff like that. And I guess like one of my pilots has explained it really well. Like weather kind of comes up the Strait of Juan de Fuca and it will collide with like more mainland air masses. And then our little island chain kind of sits right there. And so right near like Everett, Washington, kind of getting a little bit down into Seattle, are some really interesting kind of just like mixing areas of weather patterns. And so if we take a patient south, you're always kind of looking at weather conditions, and we can fly in snow, we can fly in ice. Taking off or landing in snow and ice is a little bit different, but at least like flying up at altitude, we can fly in it.
Gotcha. So really like wind and the weather path, like that is like the biggest like barrier.
Where our home base is, the runway sadly is like perpendicular, I think, a lot to the most common like prevailing winds. And so a lot of times we are coming in and out of a crosswind.
Gotcha.
And if we are landing to the south, you're hidden until just before you land behind this hill. And then all of a sudden, like you'll pop out from behind the hill and the crosswinds will smack into you. And so our pilots are incredible. Most of our pilots have grown up flying in the San Juan Island area. Or, have had extensive experience in some of these unique weather patterns. And so, I trust them.
You start out putting IVs and like dialysis, like tiny little dehydrated vein patients. Like you're great at putting in IVs. I could land a plane when I grew up learning in crosswinds.
I mean, everyone always asks like, oh, are you going to get your pilot's license? We actually have one of our paramedics has her pilot's license and commutes to work by flying her own airplane.
So cool.
So cool. But I'm like, no, the flying is for y'all. I'm good in the back.
Stay by, And so when you sent me the email over, I saw that you had your CFRN, that's certified flight nurse, flight registered nurse. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that there was, I should have guessed that there was a CFRN, but I had never heard of it before. What's the process for getting, like, do all flight nurses have to get their CFRN?
I believe there's 3 air medevac companies in Washington State. And I would imagine all 3. I know we require after a year of employment a CFRN. And then my paramedic counterpart, there's also a certified flight paramedic certification, and it's expected within a year. And it's just a test. It's like the CCRN. Actually, I would say it's like basically if you combine the CCRN with maybe like 25% understanding like flight and pre-hospital transport and like radio communications.
Yeah. I know. I was like thinking like, what would those questions even look like?
Oh my gosh. My coworkers tire of me talking about this, I'm sure, but there was one question about like establishing a landing zone and there's cows in the field and what do you do? And I'm like, move the cows. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
We're fixed
what was
wing.
The answer?
I have no clue. They don't go into kind of like a breakdown of your answers, but that was very much like a rotor wing focused question. And I'm like, if there's cows on the runway, we got a bigger problem.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh. That's so cool. We want to take a quick break from this episode to talk about the industry leader in travel nurse staffing, American Mobile, combining the largest network of facilities and providers in the country with top-level benefits like higher earning potential, premium health insurance, and 401k matching. American Mobile puts you in the driver's seat of your travel nursing career. Make sure to visit AmericanMobile.com today to discover a world of adventure with American Mobile. That's AmericanMobile.com, the first step towards your next travel nursing adventure. So, and you did adult ICU and pediatric ICU nursing. Is that generally, is that standard for being a flight nurse, or like what experience wise do you need to be applicable to one of those positions?
I am actually the only one of my coworkers right now who has any pediatric ICU experience.
Okay.
But of course, I think having, my comfort level with pediatrics definitely is a good piece that I bring to the table. Anything critical care and anything emergency department too. I think that if you have a good mix of both, like if you were an ER nurse for 3 years and then you transitioned into the ICU for a couple of years or vice versa, that is a really awesome mix as a nurse. And then if you were ever, if you add into that component, if you ever were like a volunteer EMT or you were a volunteer firefighter, having kind of like that pre-hospital component is a huge, huge help. I only had ICU with a little bit of ER when I would float down to in a small hospital. I would float to the ER and help. But just, my mindset was always ICU and critical care. And I had my numbers and my monitors and I had the story and I knew what was going on with these patients. And then, that's great for interfacility transports. Like I am comfortable with ventilator settings and multiple drips and sedation and all that good stuff. But then, you put me on a scene call. No one knows what's going on with this person. We have to establish care, establish a history, establish IVs and a plan of care and all that good stuff. That's like this pre-hospital world that I was brand new to. And I credit my paramedic partners for really educating me and bringing me into that world. Because it's very different than the ICU.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. When you say like a scene transport, what does that really look like? Because when I think of flight, I just think of like, from facility to facility. Yeah.
And that's probably about 50% of our business, I would say. We have a small hospital on the main island within our kind of archipelago. And it's a basic critical access hospital. So really anything inpatient and higher in acuity needs to be transported off. So that's interfacility. When I say scene, though, we have 2 other islands that we can access with our aircraft. And we will be activated or requested by the paramedics who work on those islands saying, okay, I had this 911 call of this elderly female complaining of chest pain. My assessment is that she is probably having a non-STEMI or some sort of like ACS event. She needs to get transported to a hospital. And so at that point, because our islands are only serviced by ferries, there's no roads out to these islands.
Right.
Which in some ways, it kind of like lowers the bar of what needs to be transported. Like in any other location, like that would be put into an ambulance and driven to the hospital, but we can't do that out here. So they'll call us or one of our, one of the other air assets that we have in the area. And we will go land at the land at the airport. And the ground paramedic responding to that 911 call will actually package up the patient and bring them to the airport. And then we'll rendezvous and they will, we'll hop in the back of the ambulance and kind of get a report from that medic, do our own super quick assessment, put our monitoring devices onto the patient, and then package them up and we will load them into our aircraft and take them to the hospital. So in that case, we're just taking them to an emergency department at a suitable receiving facility. So, our local chest pain center is, XYZ over there. So we're going to go there. And
gotcha.
Yeah. So that's kind of like what a scene looks like.
Sure. So normally, like for those island transports, like how long do you have a patient for?
That's a good question. If we go to, depends on if we use visual or instrument flight rules. And so like if the weather is super bad and we can't see 10 feet in front of the plane, we will, or I should say our pilot is talking to air traffic control and they are guiding us much like a commercial jet is guided very specifically to different coordinates. That can take longer. Anywhere, our shortest flight is probably, I would say 12, 13 minutes. Our longest flight might be down to Seattle, IFR might be like 60 minutes at worst.
Okay.
And then we stay with the patient. So we land on the ground. Our dispatch has already coordinated with ground transport at the receiving on the mainland.
Okay.
And so we just use our phones. We're just texting them, and they'll send us, kind of a script, and they'll say, okay, XYZ company, or, Seattle Fire is, well, it would never be Seattle Fire, but, XYZ company is picking you up. This is their ETA. We stay with the patient in the ground ambulance on the way to the hospital, maintaining care. And then when we arrive at that hospital, if we go to the ER, we give report to the nurses and physicians there. If it's an interfacility, we just go straight to the room that they were assigned. And oftentimes, like, that nurse has already gotten report. There's already a physician that's accepted that patient. So those are a little bit less logistic heavy. Because it's already all been done for us by the sending hospital.
Is there like one that you like better than the other? Like types of flights?
It's a good question. I never thought about that before. With the scene, you just never know what you're going to get. I mean, and this was a really good learning lesson for me, is we had a call paged out as a cardiac call. And the short report was just chest pain and shortness of breath, I think. And the medic on the ground was kind of working it up potentially for like a cardiac cause for this person's issues. And ultimately, like once we were on scene, and then by the time we got to the hospital, it looked a lot more like a sepsis picture. So, and the patient was in AFib in like the 120s, 130s. And but their blood pressure was stable. They were okay. But in my mind, I'm like, should we convert? Should we try and convert this rate? The patient said that they only started feeling bad a couple hours ago. And ultimately, after reviewing the case, our medical program director was like, no, they needed that heart rate as a compensatory mechanism, as a compensatory measure. So if you were to convert them and knock their heart rate down, you would have robbed their body. Pressure. Yeah, you would have kind of robbed their body of their efforts to compensate. And so I was like, oh, okay.
That's great. Yeah. But like, you don't have the whole picture.
Yeah, I don't have the whole picture. I know. And so like the ICU nurse in me is like, I don't
right. Like we almost shocked this person.
And it's like, so I credit my paramedics so much. I mean, they're amazing, and they all come from a very, amazing backgrounds, both on the ground. And then we have a number who've also flown before. And so, those scene calls, that's their jam. That is their world. They're very comfortable, and they're like, it's fine. He'll be good. It's fine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, are you sure?
You're just so used to like a level, like a stress level, and like everything just gets normalized.
Right. And then
it's fine.
Yeah. And then we'll go pick up like a vented patient at the hospital. And I remember my first vented patient was on propofol too. And I was like, sweet, like good. Okay, this is good. And my medic was like, so you're in charge of all that, because I don't do propofol. Like, we're good.
We don't do that.
Yeah.
So is it just up there? It's just you and your paramedic partner, and the pilot.
Yeah. So in the state of Washington, a critical care flight team is considered either two nurses or a nurse and a paramedic. I believe it can be a medic and a physician, or a nurse and a physician, and somebody has to have a pre-hospital credential, meaning, so the paramedic is technically an EMT paramedic. And then also in the state of Washington, I believe nurses are required to get their EMT. So now I'm now an EMT basic.
I see.
So at all times in our aircraft, we fly as a critical care team. One of the medical program director for the county has flown with us. And so it's a physician. And then I was the partner, I was the nurse partner. And so that was how we created that team that day.
Gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, it's just the two of us and the pilot, and then the sweet patient.
That's wild. Does it what is it like being up there with just you and your partner and the patient? Like, is it scary? Is it exhilarating? Like,
I think in the beginning it was a little scary. Sometimes when I get nervous or stressed, I talk, or like I assume other people need to be comforted. And so I'm oftentimes like, my partners will tell you, I'm like the chatty one that's like telling the patient, like, okay, we're about to speed up now. It's going to get bumpy. Oh, okay, we're going to land in about 10 seconds. You're going to feel a bump as we land.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to them. And I mean, a little bit of that is also just like your continual reassessment. Like if I'm concerned about neurostatus, I'm like, hey, how you doing? Like, talk to me. How's that chest pain? Yeah. How's that shortness of breath? What have you? And then other times the patients, you can just kind of tell they don't want to talk. Like either they feel, they're tired, they're scared, they just kind of will lay there with their eyes closed.
Yeah. Like this was not how their day was going to go.
Right? Like
when they woke up this morning.
Yeah.
Now they're in a plane.
Now you're in a plane with me staring at you like, hi, are you okay? Can you rate your 10 or your pain on a scale of 1 to 10 for me?
Oh man. Gosh.
But no, it's fun. It's
you have to be so comfortable. Lucky. You have to be so comfortable in your abilities to just be just you and your partner.
Yeah. I mean, we do a lot of education, a lot of, continuing to practice, different scenarios, different, issues that we may come across. Like one of my partners and I, we were discussing the other day, like, how do you code and intubate somebody in the aircraft and what does that look like? And, being comfortable in my abilities, I think it's a little bit of just understanding all the things that I don't know. And so just continuing to learn and grow and practice. Sure. Especially like the high risk situations.
Yeah. Do you have if you come across something that you don't know or don't understand, is there somebody that you can call, like a physician or
So we always have our medical program director, available to talk to. And so he is the physician in charge of our company. And then we also, when we are on scene at the sending facility, oftentimes too, I try and discuss with the physician there and just say, hey, okay, what are your concerns? If it's a really critical patient, what are your concerns going forward? I would anticipate like, this is how they would deteriorate. If that is the case, this is my plan. What do you think? And more often than not, they're like, yep, sounds good. And then if we're in the air, we can also call the receiving facility. And so like, I can call that emergency department and say like, hey, this is Hannah. I'm a nurse, inbound with XYZ. We've maxed out our protocols. Do you have other suggestions? And I mean, thankfully our protocols, and then the county within which we operate, the protocols there are pretty wide and varied enough to cover a good amount of situations. I would say a laboring mom, though, would be one where I would definitely want to establish a line of communication with the receiving obstetrician and just say like, hey, we're in the air. This is what we're looking like. All is good. Contractions, what have you apart? Do you want her on a mag drip? What do you need? What do you want?
Right.
Stuff like that.
Wow. I feel like we should talk about the types of patients that you see, because I didn't even really think about like moms, though. I mean, being in an island situation, you probably just transport anybody that needs to be going to like a higher level of care.
There is nowhere to deliver. I mean, unless you're doing like a home birth, attended by whoever you bring over from the mainland, there's nowhere to deliver a baby in our islands, like in a facility, and the little tiny hospital wants nothing to do with them. They're like, no, please go to the mainland. Hello. Hi. Please come get them.
Nope, not here. Move on.
So we're accredited to transport, essentially anything except for neonatal. So from anywhere from like birth to 28 days, we would not transport, and anything under 10 pounds, we do not have the appropriate and safe equipment to safely transport them.
Sure.
So we recently had a laboring mom on the island. She had her baby safely and successfully on the island. Labor had progressed too quickly for us to safely transport. And so once baby was born, of course, that child you're technically a neonate, and we cannot transport that. So at that time, our one of the other air asset providers coordinates with the Children's Hospital in Seattle. And so they actually they have the capability to have like a NICU nurse hop onto the helicopter and come out with the isolette.
Oh, that's so freaking cool.
Yeah.
How cool would it be to be that ICU nurse? Like, hey, gotta pick up my patient.
Yep. I know we're very fortunate, I think, in this state to have a fair amount of coverage for all of those different types of medical needs.
Different situations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we took mama, they took baby. And ultimately we received some follow-up, and everything's great. Everything's fine.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you get follow-up sometimes, like about how your patients are doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We, our MPD works within like one of the major health organizations. He works both at our little island hospital and then at a hospital within the same company on the mainland.
Okay.
And that's where a lot of our transports go to, is within that health system. So he has access and he's able to get us follow-up. And then unless the person's like a John Doe and we have no information, part of like our information gathering is their phone number. And so he will call every single patient and just say, hey, how are you doing? Thank you so much for, trusting us with your care and your transport. Is there anything that we could have done better? And how are you?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And so we also send out letters, and we get feedback sometimes as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You guys have to be so busy. I mean, just being like, as I'm still grappling with the fact that like, there's no other transport other than the ferry. Like, where are you coming from? How many trips would you normally do back and forth, like in a 12-hour shift or 48-hour shift, I guess?
Honestly, it really varies. We are definitely a tourist destination. So in the summer times we get super busy. And I have done 5 transports in like a 24-hour period, and then I've done none. And so it really just depends. All 3 air providers offer memberships and market in different ways. And so sometimes it's honestly just, it may be like luck of the draw, whatever that ground medic thinks is best, like let's call the helicopter because they might need to go to a trauma center where they can like land on the helipad on the hospital.
Sure.
Versus we land at an airport and then get transported in. Or maybe they're a member with this company, or, they're a member with that company, so let's call them. So sometimes
so it depends on like when you say members, like insurance based.
You do have to have insurance to be a member, but we will fly anybody. You don't even have to have insurance or be a member to fly with us.
I see.
It just kind of helps on the back end of billing. Like,
yeah.
If you are a member, I believe it's the way that it works with all 3 providers, that if you're a member with them and there's some extra part of the bill that like your insurance won't cover, your membership with that company like covers it and waives any extra fees. Gotcha.
And being a member, like member is interchangeably used with like patient, right?
Yeah.
Like it's essentially, yeah.
Okay. And most people on the islands, if they're a local, they grow up knowing that healthcare is kind of limited. And so, all 3 companies offer like household memberships, and they're decently affordable. I'm pretty sure our yearly membership for your whole household is like $39.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And then like one of our competitors, I think theirs is like either $70 or $80 for the year for the whole household.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's and what does that, I mean, is that like essentially your health insurance?
No, I think it's, I mean, like, cause like we can fly anybody and, we'll bill their insurance, and insurance might say, well, you're charging 20 grand for this air transport. We're only going to cover 15 of it. And then the patient gets saddled with $5 grand. If they're a member with us, it's covered.
I see.
Versus having to pay it.
Gotcha.
It's so messed up. I mean, that's a whole other discussion, sadly, about insurance.
I think that's like a West Coast thing too. We don't really see that so much on the East Coast. I think like from traveling, I've noticed that they're more so in like California and I think so. It's just like a stuff that I know nothing about.
My understanding is that like West Coast, we're a lot more spread out here, and we have a lot more rural areas and just total healthcare deserts. I have spent a fair amount of time on the east side of the state, so east of the Cascades, and have a cabin in an area called the Methow Valley. The closest major hospital there, I mean, just to get from the main road to the cabin, you're going like twisty, curvy dirt roads. It's going to take you 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And the closest EMS station, it would take them like 45 minutes to get to the cabin.
Wow.
So and that's where kind of like flight agencies can come in handy. And, cut down that transport time. So like if you have a major trauma and you're in the Methow Valley, you're either wanting to go to like Spokane or Seattle, and it's 4 or 5 hour drives.
Sure.
Versus on the East Coast, I've heard that like transport times are shorter. There are more companies as well. So like for our entire state, there's 3. And like in the Richmond area, there might, and like in just Virginia state, I think that like, I don't know, I can think of like 4 or 5 right off the top of my head.
Yeah. Okay. That brings a good comparison, like are there big differences between like rural flight transport and like city flight transport?
One of my coworkers used to work in Chicago. And so he worked on a helicopter kind of in just the Chicago metro area. And it was a lot of interfacility transport. Very short hops from, they were stabilized at kind of like this suburban hospital, but they need to go to the main trauma center. And like that, that might be like a short mileage, but city traffic, that might take you like 2 hours or something.
Right. Yeah.
Versus a 5-minute helicopter ride.
Gotcha.
So, okay. Yeah. And then like rural, like one of the companies that works within Washington State also works in Alaska. And so they have like Lear jets that they'll, come down from
oh my gosh.
Alaska and bring people into Seattle.
That's badass.
I can't imagine that, Bill, but
flight nurses are such badass nurses. And at least in my mind, they're such badass nurses because I feel like you're performing at the top of your license. You're autonomous, it's fast paced. I mean, is that you get to be in a plane all day? Like, do you think that's pretty accurate? Or do you feel like there's some like expectation versus reality, like component of flight nursing?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And I think you and I kind of mentioned, or I mentioned this, in a previous conversation, that getting into flight nursing has been, it's definitely different than what I thought it was. And, still very much love the role, love my company, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it. But yeah, in your mind, you kind of have this like this picture of like, oh, this badass flight nurse just like running around all day. And certainly I think for some companies, that's the case. We just had a new paramedic join us, and he came from a flight agency where it was nonstop. They were flying nonstop because the area of the country that he worked in was near a Native American reservation that had been hit really, really hard with COVID. And not only that, but just kind of an unhealthy population and very, very, very limited healthcare. And so they were having to constantly take folks from these super rural critical access facilities and get them down to the big city. And, you know, flight nurse or flight medicine, you're regulated in terms of like how long you can go before you have to stop, you are grounded, and you have to sleep. And so for them in a 24-hour period, they could go for 16 hours and then they had to stop and rest for 8 hours. Yeah. And he was like, that was your day. You would fly for 16 hours, then be grounded, God. Sleep for 8. And the moment you're back in service, your pager's going off. And so really, I think just depends on your company.
Where you're at, location.
For us, I mean, we really only service like a small chain of islands. It's one county. We have maybe like 18,000 permanent residents. And I mean, like even in the county, because we can hear county fire and EMS dispatch. There might not even be like a 911 call for a whole day. And so, you know, in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm going to be running all day and doing all this crazy stuff and intubating people and using, like you said, you know, practicing at the top of my scope. And that's not always the case. Which at least, you know, for me in this role, I'm okay with. And you do a lot of kind of independent guided training. Training with your partners, training with your medical program director will come out, teach skills.
Cool.
Yeah. So
you have to be very like comfortable and trusting and close with your team, I imagine.
Yes.
Yeah. How many,
you get to know them real well.
Do you generally fly with the same people over and over again, or? What do your weeks look like? You just do like a 48 stent per week?
Yep. Okay. So we work 48 hours and then we have 6 days off. And it just rotates. Okay. And so we do what's called a four platoon schedule where, we have 4 full-time nurses and 4 full-time medics. And each one of those people is working 48 hours. And so, in the 6 days that you're gone, 3 people are working their 48s and then it rotates back to you.
I see.
And we try and do it to where during my 48, I come on in the middle of my partner's 48. And then they go home and then I get a new partner so that there's a fresh crew member every 24 hours.
Oh, okay. That's smart.
Yeah. Yeah. And then generally I would say, yes, I do work with the same 2 partners. Occasionally it may get shifted around. Like if we're hiring and training a new person, some of our staff is, you know, they're designated preceptors. And so occasionally things may get shifted around. But for the most part, I work with the same 2 medics, and it's fun. It's good. You learn your personalities, you learn each other's quirks, and you know, he doesn't like to talk, so I talk and stuff like that.
You compliment each other. You complete each other.
Yeah.
So you probably don't work with a whole lot of other nurses very often then, because it's like you and the paramedic most of the time.
Yep. Okay. And so like if there was ever a time that like one of the medics, you know, wanted to take a day off, or, you know, switching is very much allowed. And so that's when occasionally I'll work with someone different, is like if there was a switch done. And so like coming up, I'm actually working Friday, I'm working with a nurse. And then Saturday, I'm working with one of my normal medic partners.
Gotcha.
And actually we have a new nurse precepting on Friday as well. And then a new medic precepting on Saturday. So it's always fun. It's always a good mix of folks.
That's awesome. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see in flight nursing? Like we talked about you know, some of the like downtime or, you know, what are some other challenges or that flight nurses face?
I think managing downtime is definitely, one of the bigger challenges to manage. And you really have to be independently motivated to stay on top of skills, to stay on top of, best practice. You know, in the ICU, it kind of came down like the food chain, so to say, of like, okay, guys, like this is the newest best practice. This is how we're going to be doing this. Or
modules you have to complete.
Yeah. Or like, hey, we're not using Neo anymore. We're using Levo or what have you. And, you know, it's more up to you yourself to stay on top of that. So I subscribe to like a couple different journals, and I get, I've signed up for like a bunch of different emails. So like every day I get this one email, and it's like the, you know, top 5 things you need to know in healthcare today. And it'll be like new clinical trials or what have you. And like, there's a lot of resources out there that I never actually knew about, because I felt like in the hospital, it was just kind of handed to me by like my educator. It was like, okay, this is what you're learning about today. Yeah. And then, you know, in this kind of independent world, it's more of like, okay, what am I going to learn about today?
Yeah. I never thought about that. Like, you're right. I mean, we're kind of in the hospital. You don't like actively outwardly go out and learn other new things unless you have to like complete CEs or something, because there's no, you know, you are handed like, this is the new thing that we're going to be learning about. Right. This is like the packet and this is the class that you have to take. Yeah. So all of that is up to the flight nurse.
And then we have, of course we do training. So, we're ramping up what was quarterly training. We're going to be doing it every other month now. And so our company does provide like some training, and like we'll do like one whole day will be like all skills. And so there's a certain amount of like critical care skills that will be checked off for competency of. And, you know, it's like intubation, crike, needle decompression, finger thoracostomy. For pediatrics, so for pediatrics, if you need to make a surgical airway, it's a needle crike. Or you can do, of course, now I'm blanking on it, where you literally create a surgical airway. And that's
have you ever had to like intubate or do like crazy stuff like that?
No. So of course, like my partners definitely have. I've only been doing this for a year in a decently low acuity setting. And, you know, we've been trying to go get into ORs, and then there are such a thing as like cadaver labs where you can go around the country and you can go out, do your skills on cadavers, you know, bless those sweet people that have donated their bodies to science type thing. You know, and in a pre-COVID world, it was probably a lot easier to go into the OR, and you just would get matched up with like an anesthesiologist for the day, and you would just like intubate everybody for their surgical procedures. And that's been a little bit harder. And then not being not being affiliated with a hospital system makes it a little bit more challenging. But we have all the fun mannequins, and you can make tracheas out of ventilator tubing and practice doing crikes on that. I
can see that.
Yes, we have like outdated ventilator tubing that we've turned into just a bunch of like practice crike kits.
Gotcha. What about the flip side of that question? What do you think are some of the most rewarding aspects of flight nursing?
I would definitely say just what has always struck me is how all of your patients are grateful and nice. You know, and like the experience that really was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back to get me into flight nursing was like someone being very unhappy with me. And I think as bedside nurses, you know, we all kind of have those experiences of just folks that are just going to be unhappy no matter how kind and helpful you may be trying to be. They're just not in a place where they can receive that, and they're just not having a great day. And definitely on the ground, you know, my medics, I know, have received a fair amount of just not nice people. But thankfully, when you get to the point that you're having to be medevaced, most people are like, this is serious. Okay, I'm going to be nice and thankful and like, okay, yeah, whatever y'all need to do. Okay, I'm just going to sit here and not touch anything.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, I mean, it's such a specialty and there's no way to not see that. Yeah. Because you're in a completely different craft than you normally would be. So I feel like you can't underestimate somebody's, credentials and, like their knowledge and experience because they are working in this, completely special environment.
Yeah. And I mean, oftentimes too, like if someone doesn't want to go to the hospital, they've been made aware of the necessity to go to the hospital by the ground medic or by the sending physician. So even like kind of like that legwork has been done for us. Yeah. We're just there to come in and be like, hey, you ready to go?
Let's go. Like, all right,
let's go.
Yes. What are there qualities in a person that you think that might make them more of an ideal candidate for flight nursing than others?
You definitely have to go with the flow. Every single day will look different. And every situation might demand something different from you, and just being flexible and staying positive too. Sometimes the downtime can be harder to handle for other people. And they may just get bored and irritated. But if you are staying motivated and involved, I mean, that's a great way to, of course, combat that. And I mean, I love learning. So I'm always like pulling up, whatever app or website or journal or whatever I can find. I think, being positive and, then the stereotypical, like you got to handle stress. Cause it's like, I've had multiple moments where like everything is fine. And then I look over and, something's going on and I'm like, this could get fun real fast.
Like,
hey, you good?
How much longer do we have on this flight?
Right. Like, hey, pilot,
go
how fast
faster.
Do we go? And just staying calm and knowing your protocols, know what you're capable of. Good team dynamics. I have had to definitely work on like not being so sensitive. I feel like there's a definite personality within kind of like pre-hospital, and everyone's very confident and sure of themselves. And, I more was like, oh, I don't know anything. And, sometimes would be a little bit more like on the sensitive side, like, oh, like, do you like me? And at the end of the day, it's like, it doesn't matter. It's just, if you're in an emergency situation, I'm not going to be like prim and proper and polite to you. Like, this is what we're doing. Let's get it done. Let's get this done for the patient and let's move on. And I think that kind of falls back into just go with the flow.
You have to do that with travel nursing too. To be very flexible and just very go with the flow. Are there travel nurses that do flight nursing? Like, is that a realm that?
No, but I know like one of our competitors, they have a number of bases kind of scattered across the state. I think both of our competitors have bases on the west and east side of the Cascades. And so they have like float positions to where medics or nurses will become employed knowing that they might float to like any base on the east side. And I'm assuming that's with like a couple hours notice so that they can like drive or get flown or something.
Gotcha. So it kind of has that same feel.
Yeah. I mean, you're like a float, but you'll float between bases if there's ever a hole in their schedule type thing.
Yeah. You had said something about, not maybe being humble about what you don't know, like I feel like as a traveler, you kind of do that too, because you've seen so many different ways that people do things. It's like, I don't know, it could be one way, it could be another way. Yeah. Like but you have to be very confident, or that culture, I guess, is very different than the travel culture.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, if you're going to do something, commit. You know, I think somewhere I heard a quote, and it was like, the hardest part of any skill is picking up the scalpel or picking up the blade. And it's making that decision to intubate. Like, you can stand there and hem and haw and like, well, their work of breathing.
Yeah.
But then it's like
that moment where you're just like staring at them
and you're like
hoping this was not.
Let me
gonna
just recycle that blood pressure one more time.
That's not
going to get any better.
Let's do it again.
That's not real. It looks like a bad
okay,
clip.
we need to do something. Yeah.
And then being the one standing there with like the RSI drugs in your hands, and then, you know, your partner's got the blade and the tube, and you're like, are we really we're doing this? Okay. Yeah. Cool. And I mean, like one of, like they had a trauma, on one of the other islands, and the ground medic had done 2 needle decompressions, trying to decompress a tension pneumo. And then he called in the helicopter company, and they got there. And I think that they tried to do like 2 more darts. And yeah, you know, hearing about that, I'm like, all right, that's the real deal. That's, you know, that's what I have to be prepared for. And you know, so I very much own the fact that like I'm a baby flight nurse. I'm, you know, very new to this still. Have not done a lot of those really high acuity skills, but, you know, in trying
everybody starts out,
trying to train and make sure that, you know, if and when that day comes, just being ready.
Yeah.
But yeah. It's funny you mentioned travel nursing. I think travel nursing honestly really prepared me the best because, you know, day one, you're thrust into this completely wild environment, very foreign. And then 3 days later, okay, here's your patient assignment, go. And you're like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. How do I page somebody?
Yeah. Mine was always like, what's the code to the supply room? Where do I go cry?
Yeah. Where do I go? How long of orientation do you have as a flight nurse?
I've heard some agencies will do like 6 months. You're on, you know, kind of a probationary basis. For us, it depends on your background. So like we are training 2 medics that are coming in from very busy flight programs. They know how to be flight medics. We're not, you know, when you go into the flight world, no one's ever teaching you how to be a nurse or how to be a medic.
Right.
You're being taught how to operate and take your skills and then put them into an aircraft. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, it can be as little as, I think, like my orientation, I want to say I was on orientation for like 2.5 months. Got in a fair amount of flights, saw the way that it was supposed to work out. And then when I was, you know, kind of checked off to be on my own, my 2 medic partners, it was always the same 2 partners, and they were our most experienced. And so, you know, they kind of they try to pair like the new nurse with the really experienced paramedics. And so, yeah, good mix of skills and knowledge there.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what is next for you? Do you think that you're going to stay a flight nurse for a while?
Yeah, I really enjoy I mean, there's a lot of things that I love about it. Honestly, one of the biggest things I love is just the schedule.
Yeah, I know you can't beat. Well, yeah. I
mean, working 48 and then having 6 days off is pretty unreal. I mean, I've gone on a fair amount of like hiking and like adventuring trips, and you know, you don't take time off, which is glorious.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy the interaction with our community. We're very much like a community focused company, and our mission and our focus just revolves around our little community and making sure that they have access to healthcare, even though we're in such like a remote part of the country. And it's kind of nice because like whenever I drop someone off, I'm always like, okay, like, you know, the next time I see you, it's going to be at like, you know, the Salty Fox, or, you know, I'll see you on Spring Street, you know, I'll see you at the library. Right. And it's, you know, it's like our little, you know, it's like our little island community. It's fun. Yeah. It's, you know, and, you know, so, I mean, funny enough, you know, even us, we have like our frequent flyers, and,
Do you really?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes we hear an address come out over dispatch and we're like,
this is not a bus.
That's flying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you start to learn about like, community paramedicine and different ways of providing healthcare to some of these, really rural areas. And it's super cool. It's super unique. And I'm happy and proud to be a part of it. That being said, with our low acuity sometimes and getting into the winter now, we're not going to be as busy. I actually did just sign a travel contract. So, cool. I'll be commuting back to the mainland, working 3 nights, and then I'll go back to the island. And so part of that is to, get back into the ICU, put my hands back on patients again, run through a bunch of skills, and it'll be like, okay, whoever needs, an IV put in, or whoever needs blood drawn, I'm your girl.
Yeah. Right. Just as a refresher.
Yeah. So it's in a combined like surgical, neuro, and CT surgery. CT surgery ICU.
Nice.
And so
that's perfect.
Yeah.
You just hit 3 systems right there.
Yeah, literally. And so I'm just kind of like, okay, like, yep, let's go back. Let's do a quick, it's just 2-month refresher.
Yeah.
And then back to the island. And then starting in January, I'm working as a volunteer in one of the local ski areas in the aid station. So that's like I get to work as a flight nurse EMT and use my skills there. And
oh, nice.
Yeah, go work at a ski patrol spot.
Yeah. And they have the helicopter like go there and fly people out.
Well, I'll work in the capacity. It's more of like like I'm working in the aid station as like I'm the first person that they'll see, and then if they need to be transported off, like myself and like my partner that day in the aid station will call like an ambulance or, heaven forbid, a helicopter to come grab the person if it's really bad. But I'm really excited because that's a lot of
it's a lot of
trauma
triage.
and triage, different mechanisms of injury there. And so that'll be cool. And free skiing. So.
Done.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't beat that. Like, let me just go up to like, the little clinic for a bit. We'll see a couple patients, go back down the hill.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Well, I think you're living your best life. I'm so happy that you came and talked about this today. This was an awesome conversation.
Absolutely. I've listened back to a couple of the podcasts or episodes and loved and just cackled listening to you and Shannon. Oh my gosh. It brought me back to our nursing school days and just, the whiteboards and the library and the coffees and golly gee.
Oh my God. Look where we're at.
I know.
Look at us. Look at us.
Look at us.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Hannah. And
you are so welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Send me that photo if you can find it.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. I will.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
That brings us to the end of the show. Thanks for tuning in to Nursing Uncharted. To learn more about today's episode, make sure to explore the show notes at americanmobile.com/nursinguncharted. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a guest. If you're a nurse interested in traveling, visit americanmobile.com to explore the largest database of travel nursing jobs in the industry and the amazing benefits that American Mobile has to offer. Also, a special thanks to producer Jonathan Carey, assistant producers Katie Schraubin and Sam McKay, and Aiden Dykes for the music and editing. Until next time, take care of yourself.